Well, this is inviting.
Albert murmured as he reached into his pack for a flare. He rubbed his fingers together on the worn paper as it crumbled slightly at his touch. He frowned for a moment, but a quick inspection told him that the flare itself was still in good condition. After locating and reading the instructions, he gave the top a quick twist and was rewarded by a burst of reddish light.
Shall we?
He said to the other two and took the first step out into the gloom. Immediately, the light from the flare sprang forth into the recesses of the cave, revealing its full dimensions. The passageway they were in stretched to the southeast, where it opened up into a large, high-roofed cavern. Stalactites, stalagmites, and thick columns of rock that reached from floor to ceiling lined the sides of the passageway. Overhead, they could see old lights that had been fixed to the roof of the cave, but had long ago ceased to work. As they stood, taking in the new environment, the echo of every tiny movement, the feel of stone beneath their boots, a sharp difference from the metal walkways of the vault, the drop in temperature of the cavern air. The door behind them slowly rolled back into place. The klaxons rang out again once more, but were soon drowned out as the heavy blast door slid back into its original position, blocking them off totally from the only life they had ever known. A single terminal stood beside the vault door, requiring but a simple access code to allow them back in. But there could be no going back until they had returned with the chip. The overseer was right. Without the chip, there could be no clean water. Without clean water, there could be no vault. And as much as people like Albert wanted the vault dwellers living within to have the freedom to leave, that freedom needed to be manifested as a choice. Just as he had taken issue countless times with the overseer's overprotectiveness, so Albert realized just how much worse a forced decision to leave the vault would be for those residing within. They had to find that chip before any other discussions could be made. As the last echoes died down, the trio turned from the door and to the path ahead of them. As Albert took the first step forward, his foot landed on something sticking out of the ground, and he nearly stumbled. Taking a step back, he lowered the flare. A small gasp escaped his lips. Lying not 10 feet from the vault's outer door lay a skeleton dressed in the ragged remains of a Vault 13 jumpsuit, one of its arms reaching out towards the vault entrance.
Who is he?
Natalia asked, her heart in her throat.
There were only 2 vault dwellers who ever left before us,
said Albert.
Ed and Talius.
So which is he?
I don't know.
Natalia knelt over by Albert to examine the skeleton for clues.
His pack is empty,
she observed as she rifled through the pockets of the jumpsuit.
Whoever he was, perhaps the next person took his equipment when it was his turn to leave. I wonder what he died of, though.
She pulled Albert's hand with the flare down so she could take a closer look at the bones. The touch of their hands made her abruptly remember her awkward outburst earlier inside her room. She released his hand and tried to push the thoughts aside.
All the bones seem intact.
There!
said Natalia, and Albert lowered the flare even further to where she was pointing.
Teeth marks,
she said, pointing to the indentations in the skeleton's tibia.
Rats,
Albert suggested.
Before or after he died?
Natalia asked grimly.
Quiet!
Stone commanded. The other two looked up from where they had been examining the skeleton. Stone was staring off into the darkness. He took a step forward and then immediately pulled back.
What is it, Stone?
Whispered Albert, raising the flare again. Under the light of the flare, Stone lifted up his boot and inspected the semi-solid pulp sticking to its underside.
Shit.
He muttered. As Albert raised the flare, the 3 vault dwellers suddenly became aware of the large amount of rat feces littering the passageway ahead of them.
There!
Natalia said for the second time, pointing at something moving in the cavern up ahead, close to the ground.
Sharp eyes.
Albert commented as they all focused their sight onto something small shuffling about. Yet it wasn't small.
It is a rat.
Natalia breathed.
Can't be. That thing's the size of Stone's boot.
Exactly. And I think I know what might have killed our friend here.
The furry creature chose that moment to turn its head. A pair of pale, glowing blue eyes gleamed at them from the darkness. And then the thing charged.
What the heck?
Albert began, but Stone was already reaching for the gun in the side compartment of his pack. Albert fumbled with the knife attached to his utility belt. Natalia got hers out first. The enormous rat, for that was indeed what it was, scrambled towards them, hunger in its shining eyes, its paws making tiny slapping noises on the cavern floor. It was less than 20 feet away when Stone finally got his gun aimed.
Wait!
Natalia called, placing one hand on Stone's wrist. With her other, she hefted the blade and with a mere 10 feet between herself and the rat, hurled it. The knife embedded itself into the creature's head, and it gave an unpleasant squeal that was far too loud for comfort before sliding to a complete stop.
I've heard of rats ganging up on wounded animals,
Albert said, almost breathless from the close call.
but to take on 3 full-sized humans and a half.
He added the last note with a glance at Stone.
It must have been starving. Or just plain aggressive. If I were 3 times my normal size, I might have delusions of grandeur myself.
Albert finally freed his own knife and used it to prod at the corpse.
I know mutations like this have been projected in the computer simulations, but the scale of it. Let's just hope they don't get any bigger than that.
I second that. But don't you think perhaps we should get out of this cave as soon as possible? Who knows how many more mutated rats are lurking in the darkness?
Agreed,
said Albert, and the 3 made their way forward. This time, Natalia had her blade in hand while Stone had his gun at the ready.
Do you actually know how to use that?
Natalia asked as they moved on.
Point and shoot.
Stone replied simply. In response to her skeptical gaze, he reassured.
I've watched enough movies to know how to use a gun.
Wait one moment.
Natalia said, pausing mid-stride.
Have you ever actually physically used a gun? Or read about how to use one?
I don't know about you, miss, but for me, it's illegal to start firing off a gun in the vault.
The first thing we need to do when we get out of this cave is take a good long look at that gun rag.
Speaking of weapon skills,
Said Albert as they emerged into the cavern.
where did you learn to throw a knife like that? That thing wasn't even made for throwing.
I have an old battered corkboard in my room. I used to practice with dinner knives I borrowed from the dining commons. Once you know how the weight of a thin object like a knife shifts in flight, all you really need to do is make the right adjustments to your angle, velocity, and spin.
You make it sound so simple. You must be pretty gifted.
He stopped, and the other 2 followed suit. In the gloom, they tried to make out where to go next. The cavern was joined to 2 other smaller caves to the northeast and southwest, but the light of the flare was enough to show that they were dead ends. Only a single passage to the southeast led out of the cavern. They were halfway towards the southeast passageway when they heard more scrabbling, this time from the adjoining cave to the northeast.
Do you see it?
Asked Albert, relying on Natalia's better eyesight.
I don't see it. I see them.
She pointed to a column of rock 15 yards away. A group of 3 rats had emerged from around the column.
Well, the odds have definitely been evened now. Stone, I sincerely hope your movies pay off.
The 3 rats spotted them and charged. Stone raised his firearm and fired. And suddenly, 1 gunshot sounded like a dozen. A dozen gunshots magnified by 10. One of the rats had its head explode like a melon. The other 2, splashed with its blood, didn't even slow. Both Albert and Natalia had their hands over their ears.
Oh, so much for staying quiet.
She groaned. Stone, seemingly oblivious to the deafening noise as he stared down the frenzied rats, fired off another round. This one missed. It hit the stone just in front of the nearest rat, peppering it with splintered pieces of rock. The rat squirmed and twisted away from the small explosion of stone, but resumed its assault. The 2 remaining rats had gotten close enough to be worrisome now, and Natalia removed her hands from her ears, raised her arm, and let her knife fly. It hit its mark, skewering the second rat. Albert raised his own pistol at the final rat and pulled the trigger only to find that it didn't depress.
Cock it!
Stone shouted at him.
What the hell does that mean?
Albert yelled back, but by then the last rat had already gotten too close. It reached Natalia and actually made a leap for her leg. She deftly sidestepped it, causing it to land right in the middle of all 3 of them. Stone lowered his gun and fired another round, pulverizing one of the rat's hind legs. But that didn't stop it. Albert growled in frustration at his failure with the gun. Taking one step forward, he aimed a kick at the rat's head. His foot connected. He heard something crack, and the rat was lifted into air and carried 3 feet. It landed with a thud and didn't move.
Damn it!
Natalia swore at the ringing in her ears.
Let's get the hell out of this cave before more come and Stone fires off that cannon again.
The 3 broke into a jog to reach the southeastern passageway, passing as they did so a large pile of bleached animal bones. They raced onwards, entering the passage and following it as it made a bend to the southwest. From there, it ran straight on, and as they covered more distance, they began to become aware of a natural light coming from the west. They turned another small corner in the tunnel and found themselves suddenly bursting out from the mouth of a cave. The exit opened out on a dilapidated old road that ran down the side of the mountain to join the remains of a north-south road. The sun was still rising off to the east beyond the mountains behind them, but there was ample enough light in the sky to give them a magnificent view of the Sierra Nevada stretched out all around them. For the first time in their lives, they were looking at the outside world.